A pregnant woman opened her front door, and a stranger handed her a marriage certificate proving her husband had another wife. Within 72 hours, she lost everything. The scent of freshly sheared cedar and linen-imbued paint always had a grounding effect on Emma Carter. At 32, her life mirrored the premium interiors she curated for her high-net-worth clients. Structurally sound, aesthetically flawless, and balanced down to the millimeter. Standing in the sun-drenched kitchen of her refurbished Victorian home in Oak Ridge, Connecticut, Emma smoothed her linen dress over the subtle but unmistakable curve of her 12-week pregnancy bump. For Emma, spaces dictated emotion. She knew that a room with high ceilings promoted abstract thinking, while cool blue undertones lowered blood pressure. Her own life had been designed with identical precision. Her interior design firm, Aura & Slate, was booked 6 months in advance. Her husband, David, a brilliant structural engineer, was her perfect counterweight, steady, analytical, and deeply devoted. As Emma organized her digital ledger on her tablet, she cross-referenced her company's balance sheets. Everything was in perfect equilibrium. She had achieved what developmental psychologists call generativity, a stage of life focused on building a legacy, nurturing a family, and establishing permanent roots. David walked into the kitchen, his boots clicking rhythmically against the reclaimed white oak floors, and kissed the crown of her head. The structural inspection for the downtown commercial project just cleared, David said, showing her a digital seal of approval on his phone. Load-bearing integrity is verified. Just like us. Emma smiled, leaning against him. She believed completely in their structural integrity. They had built their life on a foundation of absolute transparency, mutual ambition, and shared financial goals. But as Emma looked out the window at the manicured lawn, she noticed a black sedan idling at the curb. The vehicle sat perfectly still, its windows tinted opaque, fracturing the pristine symmetry of her suburban afternoon. The doorbell rang at exactly 4 p.m., its chime echoing with crisp acoustic resonance throughout the open-concept foyer. When Emma opened the door, she found herself face-to-face with a woman whose presence felt like a sudden, violent drop in atmospheric pressure. The woman was striking, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, her dark hair pulled back into a severe, clinical bun. But it was her eyes that chilled Emma. They held the calm, unblinking certainty of an apex predator. Behind her stood 2 men, one holding a leather briefcase, the other an older man with a camera strapped around his neck. "Can I help you?" Emma asked, her professional posture automatically engaging. "My name is Rebecca Vance Carter," the woman said, her voice steady and lacking any theatrical malice. "And I am here to reclaim my home, my assets, and my husband." Emma felt a cold spike of adrenaline. "I think you have the wrong address. I am Emma Carter. My husband is David Carter." The woman stepped forward, uninvited, crossing the threshold. The man with the briefcase opened it with a sharp, synchronized click. "I don't have the wrong address, Emma. Or should I call you by the identity you've been renting? David and I were married 7 years ago in the state of New York. We never divorced." From the briefcase, Rebecca withdrew a document and held it up. It was a certified marriage certificate bearing the official embossed seal of the state of New York, dated 3 years before Emma had ever met David. Beside it lay a stack of photographs. David laughing on a beach in Amalfi, his arm wrapped tightly around this very woman. David at a winter gala, kissing her cheek. "This is a joke. A sick, digital fabrication," Emma whispered, her voice trembling as her brain attempted to process the cognitive dissonance. She looked at the photos. They weren't deep fakes. The lighting, the grain, and the shadows were flawless. "It's not a fabrication," Rebecca said coldly. "The older gentleman behind me is Mr. Arthur Pendleton, a licensed notary and a longtime family friend who witnessed our vows. David didn't lose his first wife, Emma. He simply hid her. And now, I am taking back what is legally mine." David's reaction to Rebecca's arrival was not the explosive outrage Emma expected. Instead, it was a terrifying, pale paralysis. He claimed he had never seen the woman before, that the photographs were the product of advanced generative AI or malicious corporate espionage targeting his engineering firm. But within 48 hours, the physical world began to reshape itself around Rebecca's claims. Emma sat at her home office desk, her fingers flying across her keyboard as she initiated a comprehensive forensic audit of her own life. Emma ran the Amalfi Beach photograph through an open-source ELA tool. The pixels were uniform. The light refraction on David's face matched the ambient lumens of the setting Italian sun perfectly. There was no digital stitching. Then came the financial anomalies. When Emma logged into her personal banking portal to pay her firm's monthly vendors, an error message flashed across the screen. Account suspended, under legal review. Panic rising like bile, she dialed her private banker, Marcus Vance. "Marcus, why am I locked out of my corporate and personal accounts?" There was a long, uncomfortable pause on the line. "Emma, I received a federal asset freezing order accompanied by a certified marital property claim. A secondary social security number has been flagged against your tax ID. According to the Internal Compliance Division, your accounts are being held pending an investigation into systemic identity fraud and asset concealment." "My identity fraud?" Emma gasped. "Marcus, you've known me for 5 years. I know the person who signed the signature cards, Emma," Marcus said, his tone stripped of its usual warmth. "But the social security number attached to your business license matches a registration filed in Delaware 12 years ago by a woman named Rebecca Vance. Legally, my hands are tied." Driven by raw survival instinct, Emma waited until David fell into a deep, stress-induced sleep that night. She crept down to his private study, a room she had designed with minimalist walnut shelving and hidden compartments. Using her knowledge of structural joinery, she pressed the concealed release catch under the bottom lip of his desk's center drawer. A false bottom popped open with a muffled click. Inside lay a black leather-bound ledger and a secondary encrypted hardware wallet. Emma opened the paper ledger. It wasn't filled with engineering equations. It was filled with meticulous financial transactions written in David's precise, drafting pen handwriting. Date, transaction description, destination, account amount, USD. March 14th, 2024, layering transfer via shell company Apex Holdings LLC, Delaware, $120,000. August 22nd, 2024, equity drawdown, Aura and Slate VC Trust, Cayman Islands, $85,000. September 1st, 2025, IP asset assignment Revance Media Group, $210,000. Emma's heart hammered against her ribs. Aura and Slate was her business. Yet here was a record of her equity being systematically drawn down and funneled into offshore trusts she had never heard of. Suddenly, a shadow fell across the room. She bolted upright, slamming the ledger shut. David stood in the doorway, the hallway light silhouetting his frame. His expression wasn't one of guilt, it was utterly blank. "Looking for answers in the dark, Emma?" he asked softly. "You shouldn't dig into structures you didn't design. You might pull down a load-bearing wall." By the following Monday, the social insulation Emma had built over a decade dissolved. It began with her closest friend and maid of honor, Chloe, who refused to meet her for their weekly morning coffee. When Emma cornered her outside her boutique downtown, Chloe looked at her with a mixture of pity and profound distrust. "Emma, please don't make this harder than it is," Chloe said, backing away toward her car. "Chloe, what are you talking about?" "It's me. Someone is trying to steal my entire life, and David is lying to me." Chloe pulled out her phone and displayed a group chat that included their entire local civic and social circle. Rebecca Vance had posted a series of public records, legal depositions, and historical documents dating back 15 years. They painted a devastating narrative. Emma wasn't a victim. She was an opportunist who had assumed the identity of a deceased cousin to escape crippling debt in another state, intentionally trapping David in a bigamous marriage. "The evidence is right there, Emma," Chloe said, her voice shaking. "The birth certificates, the tax liens under your old name. Rebecca showed us everything. Even the police are saying your fingerprints don't match your birth registry. How could you lie to us for so long?" Emma stood frozen on the sidewalk. She realized with absolute clarity that Rebecca hadn't just launched a legal attack. She had executed a flawless psychological assassination. By feeding her friends real historical data doctored with precise fabrications, she had altered their cognitive perception of reality. When Emma arrived at the offices of Aura and Slate, she found the electronic keycard reader flashing red. Her passcode had been deleted from the server. Through the glass doors, she saw her 3 junior designers gathered around the conference table. Sitting at the head of the table, confidently reviewing blueprints, was Rebecca Vance. Next to her stood a corporate attorney holding a cease and desist order. Emma pounded on the glass until the office manager opened the door by an inch, keeping the security chain latched. "Emma, you need to leave. The board of directors held an emergency meeting this morning. I am the board of directors. I founded this company," Emma shouted. The attorney stepped forward, sliding a legal document through the gap in the door. According to the corporate charter filed with the Secretary of State, Aura & Slate is a wholly owned subsidiary of Apex Holdings LLC. As your husband David Carter signed over his 50% marital stake, and the remaining 50% was found to be secured using an invalid legal identity, control has defaulted to the primary creditor, Mrs. Rebecca Vance Carter. You are officially barred from these premises under corporate trespass statutes. Emma looked past the attorney to her designers, people she had mentored, whose weddings she had attended. They avoided her gaze, looking down at their iPads. The structure of her professional existence had been legally liquidated in less than an hour. Desperate and entirely alone, Emma sought out the one person in Oak Ridge who didn't care about social status or corporate filings. Frank Vance, an aging, cynical private detective nearing retirement, who operated out of a smoke-stained office above a bait-and-tackle shop. Sitting across from him, Emma laid out her laptop, her fingers trembling as she typed. Frank chewed on an unlit cigar, looking at the documents Emma had managed to download before her accounts were frozen. "You're dealing with a synthetic identity creation, kid," he said, his voice like gravel. "What does that mean?" Emma asked. "It means someone didn't just steal your wallet," Frank explained, pointing at a printout of Emma's credit history. "Someone built a parallel version of you 20 years ago. They fed the credit bureaus a steady diet of clean data under your name, but with a different backstory. Look here. Your SSN has a split file. One branch is you, the interior designer in Connecticut. The other branch is a woman who defaulted on $1 million in medical equipment leases in Nevada. And Rebecca is tying me to the Nevada profile to ruin my credibility." Emma realized, the horror dawning on her. "But how did they get my exact biometrics and history?" "To do this perfectly," Frank muttered, "they needed an inside man. Someone who had access to your medical records, your signatures, your DNA profile, and your financial passwords for years." Frank's words pointing to an inside man crystallized into a horrifying certainty. Emma left his office and drove directly to the construction site of the downtown commercial development where David was working. She bypassed the security gates, ignoring the shouts of the site foreman, and climbed the raw concrete stairs to the unfinished third floor. She found David standing near the edge of the open floor plate, looking out over the city skyline. "David," she cried out over the roar of a nearby generator. "It was you. You didn't just hide your past, you engineered mine. You've been transferring my company's assets into Apex Holdings for years." David didn't turn around immediately. When he did, his face was devoid of the warmth she had loved for half a decade. He looked at her not as a husband looks at his pregnant wife, but as an engineer looks at a calculated cost-benefit analysis. "You always had a great eye for design, Emma, but you never understood the structural foundation," David said calmly. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a voice recorder, turning it off. "Why, David? Why do this to me? To our baby?" Emma wept, clutching her stomach. "Because there is no baby, Emma. Or at least, there won't be a legal entity tied to your name to inherit anything." A voice interrupted from the shadows. Rebecca Vance stepped out from behind a concrete pillar. "The truth is," David said, his voice chillingly cold, "I never loved the designer. I loved the asset profile. Your father's estate trust was structured to unlock on your 33rd birthday, which is next month. But it only unlocks if you are legally competent and alive. If you are discredited, declared a fraudulent entity, and institutionalized or forced to flee, the entire estate defaults to your legal husband and his primary corporate entity. Rebecca and I have been planning this since before we ever met you." Before Emma could scream, David stepped forward and shoved her backward. Her heel caught on a loose piece of rebar. She flurried, losing her center of gravity, and plunged backward off the unprotected edge of the concrete deck into the darkness below. The fall did not kill Emma. She landed 12 feet below on a massive pile of fiberglass insulation blankets stored on the second tier of the construction site. Bruised, battered, and bleeding from a deep laceration on her forearm, She scrambled down the emergency scaffolding before David or Rebecca could descend to check her body. She knew that if she went to the local hospital or dialed 911 from her personal cell phone, her location would be instantly pinged by the digital dragnet David had constructed. Emma crawled into the back of an abandoned delivery van parked in an alleyway 2 blocks from the site. Using a clean utility blade from her design kit, she sliced open the lining of her luxury handbag, extracted her iPhone, and dropped it into a storm drain. She was now a digital ghost. She wrapped her bleeding arm in a scrap of clean linen from her sample bag. She had to stay alive long enough to fight back. Her pregnancy was her primary concern. She checked her pulse. It was elevated but steady. The physical shock had passed, replaced by a hyper-focused state of survival neurobiology. By the next morning, the local news broadcasted Emma's photo across every digital screen in the county. Sitting in a rundown diner on the outskirts of the state line, having paid for a hot tea with her last $20 bill, she watched the television above the counter. A stern-faced police spokesperson stood before a podium. Local authorities have issued an arrest warrant for Emma Carter, missing founder of Aura and Slate. Carter is wanted for major financial fraud, identity theft, and the alleged embezzlement of over $500,000 from local investors. Investigators believe she fled the jurisdiction after her husband, David Carter, uncovered her true identity. She is considered a flight risk and may be suffering from severe psychological delusions. The narrative was complete. The police weren't looking for a victim. They were hunting a criminal fugitive. David had successfully weaponized the state's criminal justice system against her by presenting her sudden flight and abandonment of her phone as definitive proof of a guilty conscience. Emma left the diner, pulling her hoodie low over her face. Her community, her money, her business, and her legal protection had been completely erased. She had only one option left. She needed to find Frank Vance, the detective, and a skeptical investigative journalist named Leo Vance, Frank's estranged son, who specialized in exposing corporate corruption. Emma managed to reach Frank's office by walking along the railroad tracks, avoiding the main arterial roads monitored by traffic cameras. When she burst through the door, Frank didn't call the police. Instead, he locked the deadbolt, pulled down the blinds, and signaled his son, Leo, who was already waiting with a professional audio recorder and a stack of archived court microfiches. "You look like hell, kid," Frank said, handing her a clean towel and an antiseptic wipe. "But you're alive. That means David's structural calculations failed. They tried to kill me," Emma said, her voice cracking as she cleaned her wound. "They admitted everything. My father's estate trust. They're trying to force a default so David inherits it all." Leo, a sharp-featured man in his late 30s with intense, analytical eyes, leaned forward. "I didn't believe your story at first, Emma. It sounded like an online conspiracy theory. But my dad made me look into the historical probate filings from 20 years ago, specifically your father's original corporate partnerships." Leo laid out a physical document on the desk, a yellowed, handwritten diary, and a corporate partnership agreement dated 2006. "Look at the signatures on this original partnership agreement between your father and his former associate, Marcus Vance Sr., Rebecca's father," Leo pointed out. "We ran a chemical analysis on the ink from the amendments added 5 years ago. The ink contains a synthetic polymer that wasn't manufactured until 2018. The documents that set this entire identity swap in motion were retroactively backdated." Emma traced her finger over her father's forged signature. "So Rebecca's family has been hunting my family's estate for 2 decades. "Exactly," Frank nodded, blowing a cloud of cigar smoke toward the ceiling fan. "Rebecca's father went bankrupt when your dad's business took off. Her family blamed yours for their financial ruin. When your father died, they realized they couldn't breach the trust directly because it was protected by an ironclad spendthrift clause. So they decided to modify the target instead. They didn't attack the trust, they attacked you." "David was the asset operative," Leo explained, opening his laptop to show a complex network diagram. "He was recruited by Rebecca while he was still in engineering school. His entire introduction to you, your courtship, your marriage, it was a long-range corporate espionage operation. They spent 5 years building your confidence while slowly, systematically altering your digital footprint in the background." Emma felt a wave of profound nausea, followed by an icy, absolute clarity. Her entire romantic life had been a designed simulation. Every "I love you," every shared vacation, every plan for their child's nursery had been a calculated step toward her systemic elimination. How do we stop them if they control the digital record? Emma asked, her eyes hardening. Leo smiled grimly. We don't fight them in the digital realm where they have the home field advantage. We use their own architecture to draw them into a physical environment where they can't delete the evidence. To trap a structural mastermind like David, Emma had to understand the exact mechanics of the trap she was currently sitting in. Leo pulled up the digitized legal charter of the Carter Vance Estate Trust on his secure screen. Here is the pressure point, Leo said, pointing to Section 9.4 of the Trust Framework. Section 9.4, Default of Primary Beneficiary. In the event that the primary beneficiary, Emma Carter, is legally declared non-compos mentis, of unsound mind, or is convicted of a felony involving moral turpitude prior to her 33rd birthday, all power of appointment and fiduciary asset distributions shall immediately devolve to the surviving co-signatory spouse, David Carter, and his designated corporate entities. Your 33rd birthday is in exactly 48 hours, Leo said. Rebecca's attorney has already scheduled an emergency ex parte hearing with Judge Thomas, who happens to be a major investor in David's commercial projects, to declare you an invalid legal entity and award total asset control to David. They need my physical signature or a definitive court declaration of my absence to finalize the transfer, Emma said, her mind working through the design parameters of the scenario. If I show up at that hearing, they'll have me arrested on the spot by the marshals based on the fraudulent warrant. Unless, Frank interjected, we catch the mastermind admitting the fraud on a hard, unalterable medium before the judge can gavel the hearing to order. Emma spent the next 12 hours working with Frank to build an ironclad forensic package. They couldn't rely on standard digital recordings, which David's legal team could easily claim were AI-generated deepfakes. They needed physical, immutable evidence that met the strict criteria of the federal rules of evidence. Frank produced an old-fashioned, high-fidelity analog tape recorder that utilized magnetic tape. No digital signatures, no code to hack, no metadata to alter, Frank grinned. And I've got a notary friend who is going to sit in the van with us to witness the recording live, stamping the log sheet the second the tape rolls. Emma looked at her reflection in the dark window of the office. The terrified, pregnant woman who had fled the construction site was gone. In her place stood a woman who understood that everything built can be dismantled if you find the primary structural anchor. We lure David to the one place where he feels completely safe, Emma said. Our home, the house I designed. At midnight, 24 hours before her scheduled legal erasure, Emma slipped back into her suburban home through a basement window she had left unlatched during the renovation. The house was dead quiet, smelling faintly of Rebecca's expensive perfume. She walked upstairs to the master bedroom and turned on a single, low-wattage desk lamp. She knew David's security system would immediately alert his phone that the primary network router had detected her specific laptop MAC address connecting to the home Wi-Fi network. Within 20 minutes, Emma heard the distinct purr of David's luxury SUV pulling into the driveway. The garage door opened and closed with a heavy mechanical thud. She sat perfectly still in the armchair as David entered the bedroom. He wasn't alone. Rebecca stood beside him, her expression shifting from surprise to cold amusement as she saw Emma sitting in the dark. Well, look what crawled back out of the foundations, Rebecca said, crossing her arms. I must say, Emma, your resilience is almost admirable. It's over, David, Emma said, keeping her voice level and projecting a vulnerability she no longer felt. I have the ledger. I know about the layering transfers to Apex Holdings. David laughed softly, stepping into the center of the room. The ledger? You mean the digital file you copied? My legal team will have that suppressed in court before you can even take the stand. To the world, you are a ghost who stole a dead woman's social security number. You have no standing, no money, and no husband. Emma leaned forward, letting the lamplight hit her face. You built a beautiful plan, David. But like all bad engineers, you forgot to check the soil mechanics. You assumed my father's trust was the only asset. David frowned, his analytical gaze narrowing. What are you talking about? My father didn't just leave an estate trust, Emma said, drawing from her deep knowledge of her family's corporate history. He left a reciprocal indemnity clause in the original 2006 partnership agreement. If Marcus Vance Sr. or his heirs ever attempted to challenge my identity or property claims, the entire corporate infrastructure of Apex Holdings, including all the funds you've been funneled over the last 5 years, automatically drops into a liquidation trust managed by an independent third party. I didn't connect my laptop to access my files, David. I connected it to trigger the automated corporate default notice. Rebecca's face went white. She pulled out her phone, her fingers furiously typing. David, he's right. My corporate banking app just flashed an automatic asset freeze notice. The Delaware Registry has locked our corporate filings under a suspected fraud investigation. UB*****H. David roared, losing his calm composure for the first time. He lunged across the room, grabbing Emma by the throat, pinning her against the wall. You think you can take down my structures? I built this life. I'll snap your neck before you leave this house. Get your hands off her, Carter, a voice boomed from the doorway. Frank Vance stood there, his service revolver drawn and leveled directly at David's chest. Behind him, Leo held up the analog tape recorder, its red recording light glowing brightly in the dark room. Next to Leo stood a uniformed state police captain, who stepped forward with handcuffs glinting in the dim light. The arrest at the house should have ended the nightmare, but the conspiracy had one deep structural anchor left. The next morning, Emma stood in the grand, wood-paneled courtroom of the county probate court for the ex parte hearing. She wore a pristine navy blue suit, her hair pulled back into a sharp, professional style. Sitting at the defense table next to Leo and Frank, she watched as David and Rebecca were led into the courtroom in handcuffs, flanked by a team of high-priced corporate defense attorneys. Judge Thomas sat on the bench, his expression unreadable as he reviewed the case files. He knocked his gavel down once, the sound echoing through the cavernous room. We are here to resolve the emergency petition regarding the identity status and asset disposition of the Carter Vance Estate Trust, Judge Thomas declared. Emma's private banker, Marcus Vance, stepped forward from the gallery, taking the witness stand. Emma expected him to testify neutrally about her frozen accounts. Instead, Marcus looked directly at the judge and pulled out a certified document bearing Emma's forged signature. Your Honor, Marcus Vance said smoothly. As the fiduciary representative for the banking institution, I must present this signed confession and asset waiver executed by the individual claiming to be Emma Carter 2 years ago. This document confirms that she knowingly utilized a synthetic identity to secure her commercial lines of credit. My institution must support Mrs. Rebecca Vance's claim as the sole legal beneficiary. Emma felt a cold shock. Marcus Vance wasn't just her banker. He was Rebecca's cousin. The final betrayal came from the very financial institution she had trusted to protect her business capital for half a decade. The system was rigged from the inside out. Judge Thomas nodded, leaning forward. This seems definitive. Unless the defense has an extraordinary counterargument, I am prepared to grant the petition to invalidate the current marriage and transfer the trust assets to Apex Holdings. Leo stood up, his posture projecting absolute confidence. Your Honor, we object. And we move to introduce our physical forensic evidence package, verified under an unbroken chain of custody. Leo walked to the center of the courtroom and placed Frank's analog tape recorder on the evidence table. He handed a certified, stamped log sheet to the bailiff to pass to the judge. What is the meaning of this? Judge Thomas snapped. We do not play audio tapes in an administrative probate hearing. This tape, Your Honor, contains a recording captured last night at Mrs. Carter's residence, Leo said, his voice echoing through the courtroom. It contains a full, unambiguous confession by David Carter and Rebecca Vance, wherein they admit to fabricating the synthetic identity profile, forging the 2006 partnership amendments, and explicitly stating their intent to use this court to defraud the beneficiary of her estate. Furthermore, we have a certified forensic report proving that the document Mr. Marcus Vance just introduced contains a signature forged using an automated autopen device, matching a model registered to David Carter's engineering firm. Leo hit the play button on the analog recorder. David's voice filled the courtroom, clear and terrifying. Asterisk. I never loved the designer. I love the asset profile. Rebecca and I have been planning this since before we ever met you. I'll snap your neck before you leave this house. Asterisk. The courtroom erupted into stunned silence. Judge Thomas looked down at the log sheet, then at David, whose defense attorneys were already packing up their briefcases, realizing the case had mutated from a civil asset dispute into a federal criminal conspiracy trial. The legal collapse of the conspiracy was swift and devastating. Confronted with unalterable analog evidence and facing federal charges of identity theft, bank fraud, wire fraud, and attempted murder, David Carter broke under interrogation within 48 hours. He turned state's evidence against Rebecca Vance and her cousin Marcus, exposing the entire 20-year network of fraudulent filings and offshore shell companies. 3 months later, Emma sat in the newly restored offices of Aura and Slate. The electronic keycard reader flashed green as she touched her thumb to the sensor. The FTC had completely purged the synthetic Nevada profile from Emma's credit record. Her frozen accounts were unlocked, and the court had ordered the full asset forfeiture of all funds held by Apex Holdings, transferring them back into Emma's primary corporate accounts as restitution for her losses. Rebecca Vance and David Carter were sentenced to 15 and 12 years in federal prison, respectively, their assets liquidated to pay for the extensive forensic accounting investigations required to untangle their web of deceit. The autumn afternoon sun poured through the high windows of Emma's Victorian home, casting long, golden geometric patterns across the clean white oak floors. The house was peaceful again, stripped of its ghosts. Emma stood in the nursery, holding her newborn daughter, Maya, tightly against her chest. The room was designed using the principles of developmental psychology: soft, pastel greens to promote cognitive tranquility, natural wood textures to encourage sensory grounding, and a massive bay window that filled the space with pure, unadulterated sunlight. Frank and Leo Vance stood in the kitchen downstairs, their laughter filtering up through the house. They had become her new, chosen family, men who valued truth and structural integrity above all else. Emma looked down at Maya's tiny, perfect fingers. Maya's birth certificate was flawless, registered under an ironclad, legally verified identity that no one could ever challenge or erase. Emma had learned that a truly perfect life isn't one that looks beautiful from the outside. It's one that is built on an immutable foundation of truth, resilience, and inner strength. She had survived the systematic attempt to erase her existence, and in the process, she hadn't just saved her life. She had designed a future that was completely, beautifully, and permanently her own.